So thank you guys for staying with my fireside chat with Meaza. I mean, I literally have 2 lines maybe to introduce Meaza because I'm sure you all know her anyway, so I'm not going to waste my time with introductions. But Meaza Gebremedhin is an international relations specialist and an advocate for human rights. And yeah, without further ado, Meaza Gebremedhin. Thank you, Meaza, for being with us here today. So where should we start? I think I want to start just like right from the beginning. What were you doing? What were you up to when the war first began in 2020? And how did you somehow decide to step into the role that you're in right now?
Thanks, Melat. Thanks, Melat. Good evening, everybody. It's an honor to be here. I want to say thank you to organizers of Wa'ala Tigray for inviting me and for having me here. Just so we all understand clearly, I would speak both in Tigrinya and English. So just to begin with how I got involved into advocacy and also what I was doing when the war broke out. I remember it was past midnight, November 3rd, and I was still in graduate school. So I was doing my assignment. I was working on my homework. And I got a call from Tigray. A person called me, and I could hear gunfires from the background. And I asked what's happening, because the line was a bit choppy, it wasn't clear, but I could hear the gunfire. And I asked what happened, did they start? Because it was kind of obvious. We saw the war coming, so it wasn't something that happened all of a sudden. So I had to ask, did it begin? And the person said yes. And we could only speak briefly, maybe for a minute or two. Right after that, the line got disconnected. And the person said, neutralize Gerna Yomina, Tigray Tsariya. These were the only things. And after that, there was no any communication whatsoever. And so I didn't know what to do at that time. No matter how well-read you are in politics or diplomacy, nothing could prepare you for the kind of responsibility that all of us had to shoulder. So I didn't know anything. The first thing I did was reach out to TMH. And I called people at TMH and told them, I just got a call and this is happening. And they were already informed as well. So I remember it was past midnight. We went live on TMH and we kind of broke the news. I spoke in English. Alula was there. Haile Mikhail, the journalist, was there. We used 3 different languages and we broke the news to the diaspora. And I didn't sleep after that. I had to think ways of organizing our community. And so I remember I didn't sleep. The next morning, I was up with my glasses and my shash, and I was live on Facebook telling people to open Twitter account and at least to be active on Twitter because there were a lot of uncertainty at that time. So that's how my advocacy with regards to Tigray genocide began.
Okay, so keeping that in mind, that's the initial steps that you took. You broke the news, you used media outlets to kind of convey to the diaspora what was going on. In terms of your advocacy in general and also right in the beginning, is there any changes in the course of action you would have taken when you began advocacy?
Yeah, I mean, it has been a learning curve for all of us. We all did what we knew was best. We tried our best, but none of the approach we followed were perfect. There are a lot of flaws. For example, at the beginning, I was using Facebook extensively. That's how I got connected with so many people. And معات عقمي للوم سوات له على فيسبوك أكتيف تكون تلقوا على تويتر لنا رأي يوم we were able to establish so many organizations, especially those who were born and raised here, didn't know anything about Tigray because they were lost in this idea of Ethiopia like everyone else. So it was new for them. They needed a moment to learn and to figure out how to help Tigray. So maybe we could have been a little bit more organized and patient with one another because I remember getting into disagreements with people telling them, no, this is what we need to do. And they were kind of resisting because they didn't understand it fully. But I think from my end, maybe I should have been a little bit more understanding of the challenge because everything that was coming from Tigray was coming in Tigrinya. So the language barrier played a role in the gap of information that people had. But I think eventually we kind of mastered our craft and we were able to work collectively, especially up until our Alula operation. I would say the diaspora was very much effective in our approach, in our advocacy. And I think that's primarily because most of the work we did, strategizing based on our expertise and our knowledge. Our commitment was simply to amplify the plight of the people back home and to make sure our stories are heard. So we did an excellent job I would say for the first half of the conflict. But after that, of course, there were so many problems.
Okay, so right now, what kind of projects and initiatives are you working on, and what have you worked on so far?
I think, like, following the Pretoria Agreement, a lot of us had to take a moment to reflect on our contribution so far. I personally, I had to take a few minutes and just أطويلك حسب نيرني مسكح حزي أو تجاور قالسي كم مأزا تأيوني روميناي تاجيرا. Are there lessons to be learned? Are there things that I need to improve? And also, I had that conversation with myself, and I decided it was more of Tigray. أمني على مدرخات كتفلت politiكنياتات بسن سرعات بزعوان هنا كوز كفلتو diaspora زلسو كتأخاخ resource mobilize مقوار قال يونيرو حزقن. I feel like the most productive thing that I can do at the moment as an individual is want to empower the civic societies back home and also to make sure the fight for justice and accountability continues. So to that effect, I'm still working organizing discussions on accountability and justice. Just to name an example, just last month, our Harvard University had عوية زجاجنا نيرنا عطوا زخنا بزحات أمريكا منجستي human rights watch كالوتن استساتفوا له even كاو تجري ون حنت حفتنا أمتينا so بدعم تطبق زخنا مية تساريحو State Department كالوتن خم تسرح حتى له جن بعوي سؤالك حسوت اللخو توانا تجمعنا نيدقت رح يكون نيوعلنا تجمعون اللؤيو so أعد زلوا political system نخغير نخستخاخلنا يتحسس لون تخمت نتحركينه أفتقرأ زلوا ناي civic محاورات كابزخون يكون politicaوي وداوت عنتون تأخوينهم ديمقراطي نمثل راح قالوا سخول اللوم السنخون ولا عقل ممكن نتقلوا so capacity building comes in different forms and shapes. It can be resource midline عاتهم experience share مقوار spaces نعاتهم مستفعل لأكلات مفلات connection build مالكم خوني خليو so at the moment زجبر again I share this because I think it's important for all of us to reflect on our journey. We have to be intentional. قدم حزي I feel like it was easier because we had clarity of purpose لزنورنا we had unity of purpose. ناي علامة نترت نيرو حدنا تونيرنا حزقنا علامة نترت بزحيلن all of us are looking for guidance and clarity and so that makes it a bit more harder and tough to contribute meaningfully. So to clarity سم أنت كنركو كلها نشتن جزء وسيدنا نوعلتنا كنت إيقنينا زلقنا تأيو I found it to be very helpful personally, and I think it will be helpful if everyone else does that too.
Okay, something that's quite consistent in what you just said in the last couple of minutes is that before Pretoria, after Pretoria. And I think that's a bit of the elephant in the room, if we're honest. Yeah. So before Pretoria, there was a certain element in the way we used to advocate that has definitely drastically changed now.
Yeah.
So before Pretoria, I think you mentioned guidance. Guidance is very important as well. But before Pretoria, there was a lot of interaction between the different state apparatuses, like different offices, different individuals as well as institutions within Tigray of how to move things forward in terms of our advocacy.
Right.
Our relationship was quite intertwined.
Right.
So, and that was because, one, there was a middleman, and that middleman were the government of Tigray representatives. And these government of Tigray representatives, they would provide information, they would provide guidance, they would provide up-to-date information that was on the ground that we have suddenly lost now.
Yeah.
So with this vacuum of the loss of information, the loss of sometimes transparency, I would say, the loss of even having that much influence, as being as influential as we were before, what can we do as the diaspora to take back what we had initially, to take back that clarity that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think since you asked the question, I think it's important to clarify some things. When the war began, as far as I'm concerned, there was no any organized preparation whatsoever in the diaspora. There was absolutely nothing. The diaspora was left to itself to fend for Tigray, like to find ways to advocate. ጀመሪሉ ምንም guidance ዝህብ ሰብ አይነበረን ገለ አይነበረን. It's just few individuals ነንባዓልትና ንፋለጥ ተደዋዊልና we started initiatives left and right. I remember talking to Mr. Mulgeta and others at Wa'ala, and just brainstorming if we can establish some sort of organization or like an umbrella that will mobilize people. This is before the coming of Omna into picture. So ብዙሕ ዝበሃል guidance አይነበረን, but I remember maybe like a month or a month and a half into the conflict, both ambassadors came into the picture, Ambassador Fsa, Ambassador Burhana. They were serving as government representatives and they were providing guidance, and I believe eventually ካልኦት ናይ መንግስቲ ተወከልቲ እውን ተወሲኾምሎም ኣነ ዘለኹሉ ካሊእ ጉጅለ ለለ ተመስሪቱ we were ኣንሕና ብዲያስፖራ ተመሪፅና ናብኡ ንመንግስቲ ወከልቲ ዘይኮናስ ንመንግስቲ ክነማኸር ናይ ዲያስፖራ ድምፂ ክንከውን ኣብቲ መንግስቲ ዝገብሮ ስራሕቲ ተባሂልና ኣቲና it wasn't that productive ብዙሕ ከምቲ ዝተሓሰበሉ ኣሳታፊ ገለ ኣይኮነን ነይሩ ግን ሞኪርና ማለት እዩ so ብዝኾነ ኮይኑ ሽዑኡ guidance ገለ ይመጽ ነይሩ እዩ ግን I want to emphasize to guidance ሽዑ ዝመጽ ዝነበረ it's because ናይ ዓላማ ንጽረት ነይርና እዩ ኣብቲ ውግእ ዝነበረሉ ግዜስ ናይ ኩሉ ትግራዋይ ዝነበረ ዓላማ ተተኻኢሉ ዓድኻ ነጻ ክትገብር ተተኻኢሉ ሃገር ንምስረት ተዘይ ኮይኑ ተገዲዱ ግን ህዝብናን ዓድናን እስካብ ህልቂት ምድሓን እዩ ነይሩ ተዓላማና so ሽዑኡ ኩሉ ትግራዋይ ዝተፋላለየ political opinion ይሃልዩ ዝተፋላለየ መልኻኽቲ ይሃልዩ we all came together but after the Pretoria agreement that kind of it got lost and it's natural for things to have this kind of progression but I think Hazun the fact that there isn't an official government representative makes it a little bit difficult to get clarity حتى تحليس نمنينا نطيقو استودبا كايدا ገለ ብዙሕ የለን but we have also to understand the Pretoria agreement forces the Tigray government to be abide by certain regulations, right? Like as a region, you may not necessarily have the right to conduct foreign relations, and maybe having a government representative in the diaspora could be an element of foreign relations, which is a right designated to the Federal Ministry of Foreign Ministry. So there are some legalities, I believe, that are kind of slowing the process, but it would be important if there could be an official representation and way of communicating. Even if that's not possible, though, we can strengthen our communities. Communityታትና እንድሕር ጠንካራታት ኮይነን ንደልዮ ነገራት ንኽመጽእ ንምግባር we will have more leverage. One thing I have learned, ዲያስፖራ ኩሉ ግዜ ንቅርሺ ክኾን ተሎ እዩ ዝድላ ቅርሺ ክድሎ እንተሎ ዲያስፖራ ንጉስ እዩ ይጥያቕ በሪ ንኩሕኳሕ ንባዕለይ ሓዊሲ ኩላህና ገገዛኹምና መፀና ንጭቕጭቐኩም ማለት እዩ ግን Tigrayans in the diaspora have more to offer. ካብ ቅርሺ ዝበለጸ ሓሳብ ኣለና ኣመለኻኽታ ኣለና so እሱታት ብስነ ስርዓት entertain ዝግበረሉ platform ክፍጠር ይግብኦ and I feel that platform cannot be social media. That platform cannot be Twitter spaces, it can't be clubhouse rooms, it can only be community centers, which is why I am a big proponent of what Wa'ala does. Every year they go from one town to another town and hoping that they will open small Tigray communities. After the community center ተዝህሉ ነይሩ there wouldn't have been a need for Tigrayans to go to Twitter space and talk about everything that may not necessarily be convenient for public spaces. So حزون تونا تأجم كوينو زلوا تجراي على social media راح connected كوينو. On the ground, on grassroots, there isn't that much connection within our communities. So if we continue to open and build community ببعده, maybe we will create a space that would eventually give us the kind of power that we need to meaningfully contribute towards the democratization process in Tigray.
Okay, so that's actually a very good answer, because I think what you've done is you've brought it back to the aims of Wala itself, which is building community, making sure you're strengthening ties, because when we talk about being united, I mean, it's Tagaru everywhere, but also your small group of Tagaru that live within your state, that live within your community, first of all, need to be united to actually build a relationship with Tagaru elsewhere, with Tagaru in Europe, Tagaru in Africa. So that is a very, I think, a very important point that you've mentioned. And I think, I mean, we've had a lot of discussions where I've mentioned to you a lot of complaints that I've had where I've said, okay, so I feel like sometimes decisions have already been made when we are asked to contribute to them. So there's a culture of come and join, but are we really contributing? And how do we get past those challenges and obstacles to make sure that we're not imposing our own beliefs or maybe making ourselves bigger than we are when it comes to the internal matters of Tigray, but also having the right level of contribution?
Right. I think it's all a matter of conversation, right? It's all a matter of having an open and candid discussion with one another, including with the leadership back home. So we have to continue creating spaces and holding spaces where we can have this honest conversations without any hesitation. If we do that, then we'll be able to find out what is exactly needed on the ground, because sometimes the information we get could be misleading. We're not privy to everything that's happening on the ground. And so we could be counterproductive in our efforts too, but those challenges can only be tackled if there is an open flow of information. So it is important for community leaders, civic society leaders in the diaspora to have a solid connection and communication with civic society on the ground. We can't only rely on governments. It's important to support our government so long as they have the people's will, but it's also important that we work with non-governmental entities on the ground too, because to have an effective state, you know, the civic society and governments need to work hand in hand. So I think for the diaspora, this is a moment for us to understand things properly. You know, sometimes our perception of things could be different from the reality on the ground, and we can only get to that point if we create alliance and solidarity with civic society on the ground. And media also plays a great role here. Like, we need media that can effectively portray what's happening on the ground. And احنا للأبدأ جزء ساعات we have to be intentional. I feel like we lack intentionality in so many of the things we do. تأجم عدوش تيخر أنتلو. I'll just give a simple example, right? Like, I see us all being outraged, angry, sad, and hurt, rightfully so. But what are we doing to change that? To change that, am I doing my fair share of the job to make sure the brave soldiers that gave leg and arm for my sake are taken care of? So it's good to talk about things on social media. You know, it's good. Freedom is good, but we have to be intentional. Somehow we got at you. Am I really helping, or am I hurting Tigray in the long run, or looking at things comprehensively? So to get a good answer to all of these questions, the solution is community center, like strengthening grassroots communication and connections. And that way you can summon any government leader, you can bring them, and you can have a solid conversation. But you can't have that if you're not connected amongst each other. So I think it all goes back to lack of organization on the ground. And I would say for people who were lost in this bigger picture of Ethiopia for so many years, and who tried to find their way back into their roots, and only in the past 2 years, we're doing a great job. We shouldn't be so harsh on ourselves, but there is so much work that needs to be done. And Yeah, like I was saying earlier, the solution is getting connected with civic society on the ground, making sure that they are empowered enough to have an independent way of doing things. And we also have to be very understanding of their challenges too. I'll give you random example. Last time self-nero na IDPs መቐለ ዝተኻየደቶም ዝተፋነቐሉ ዝገበርዎ, and I was working with the organizer so I wanted them ካፍቲ ሰልፍ ዘለለ ንትግራይ ኮና ንስለፈሉ ለና ህዝቢ ትግራይ knows the problem ተሰልፍና it's for the international community primarily and for those who brokered the Pretoria cessation of hostilities agreement. So messages need to be sent in English in a language that they understand, and the letter should be written and communicated to them. They're willing to do it, but they don't have the people to do it. They don't have the capacity. So I didn't understand so I was like hammering them. I didn't understand them. So it's really important. We want things to be done, but we don't understand the challenge that people on the ground are going through. So while we expect them to do more, it's also important that we find a productive way of helping them to do more.
Absolutely, I can agree with you more. But with some of these challenges that you mentioned, where are the gaps where there is a gap for the diaspora to fit in without actually having to be guided by any other stakeholders, maybe no government intervention, nothing but the diaspora putting itself into that gap to fill the gap? Where are some of these gaps that you have identified throughout the last 2 years?
Yeah, I would say some of the gaps are in our community, I don't think we have a problem of or shortage of people that are dedicated and committed to Tigray's cause. But what we have shortage of is the political commitment and will to empower young leaders, particularly women. You see, women do almost all of the work, but I would say it's only Wa'ala that tries its best to empower the young leaders and women. Everywhere else you go, it's men, and it's elderly men all the time. And no offense to عبيت سوات عبيتي ولدنا, ግን you have to understand ناتاتكم بقعة زقلت, it's by the people you create. So كم محبر كم community مرحي نعقوم تتك ونعقوم زتك حدش ولدون دحر زي فريخم, you have failed miserably مالتيو. So زخي يخون منتي كتسرحوا يقبا, and you have to leave space for younger generation to take over. I will give an example of my own. I am one of the people who, joined hands and created Omna at the beginning, right? بأمنا ببايلونا مسرت every 2 years board يمرت you. So كل تعمت مسملة, I could have insisted to say like everyone else does in every other محبر you go, but it is not helpful. If I go as ما رحت نحركوين أنا نخلي inspire غير خوايز وقت ما رحت كفرني إني. So كل تعمت مسملة, I said دقي ما كمرت أنا نوعلي I would adrن, I am going to step down بفقادي so others can come and take over. That is what leadership means. But I don't see that happening in so many محبers that we have. So the fundamental gap I see is this lack of intentionality in creating leaders that will take Tigray, further. This is true for political organizations and for civic societies. And the other problem is, moya mesaret zgawara sarah khasrah, I know, and most of the time we have to respect meritocracy is going to take Tigray places. بمويهم تمهاروا لمدو زلوهم سوات كمرحنا نفكر كنكللنا. If it is an economy, I don't know, ناي قط أو محبر ندحر كوينو, we have to find a way to lead people that are actually experts on that subject matter to lead us, and we have so many of them. زي تريقوهم زي يمتو, it's because the environment is not as hospitable as it should be. So we have to work on meritocracy and also on creating spaces that are inclusive, understanding and welcoming of people of all political backgrounds, all religious backgrounds. So we have to be intentional and understanding of our diversity and create a platform that is accepting of everybody. As small as we are, we're diverse too in so many ways. So the community centers we build, the mahbers we create, the openings we share have to be reflective of that reality. I feel like these are the most important gaps that I have witnessed in the past 2 years, but also to be strategic in our approach, right? Hazi, kam tagaru ta'ina nideli. We really don't know that. I don't think there is a consensus as to what Tigray wants. We all want peace, salam lidalina, but how does that peace come? How is it actualized? We really don't know. We haven't built that consensus because we're not talking about it. If people come with different ideas, they're frowned upon, they're bullied, they're isolated. We're not treating each other with grace. بتعمينا النف بتعمينا نخرين نوعلتنا إنا نبلزل لنا and السلالة it makes Tigray as a collective weaker and weaker بتسألي بقولي لخن تقعينا نخون مالتي so زيهم كلهم نخستخاخلون دحر كوينهم مستوعب لنا intentional مخان كله لو ما أنت زاروا نجار تجراي نتازدلا تجراي دحرستو سنة عمد كتنت اللي زدلا تجرايس نعاخ مجير contribute زجبرين لقن حسب لنا if we don't do this can it's just reactionary إن نخون every generation Tigray is faced with an enemy that wants to wipe us all out and we pay thousands and millions and then إشتن سلام نركب and then we go back to the same thing because we're not working on things that would strategically liberate Tigray and free our people. So maybe those back home don't have the necessary luxury to think strategically because they're under this imminent threat or survival. But those of us here, especially now, we have the space and the capacity to think أرحق قبلنا نشتي. لو ما أنت زلات تقرأي تأت مثل دحرستو السنة عودنا وياخد كدية زدلا السنة خدمة تخص كم individual and as a community أنت أيو خوايز حلنا بس نسرع استراتيجية وتينا خنسر حلنا. One thing I want to say is like talking to diplomats here in the US and elsewhere, the one thing I understood is their idea of Ethiopia is everything that was fed into them by the likes of Burhanu Negga. This is a project that has been in the making for centuries. نخندي عمتات صعيرهم سريحهم زمت وفرهم يمزح في زلوا people like Burhanu Negga and those in that Ethiopianist camp مالتيو. So أنحنا جنا حزينا نفتنا political space جلنا أتزلنا. جن strategy نحرنينا خوين plan نحرنينا خوين نعوتنا plan نحر زيونا جن لو ما عند زخونة تحوت العلا أنا متفق نقوي ساتفق مسألة ناوكالين بتن and that is a problem. So إذا ما أنت كقرف we have to take lessons from our experiences and do better. So I hope this past years have taught us lessons that are so important for the liberation of Tigray.
I mean, that was a brilliant answer. I think what you said, create great systems that stand the length of time rather than focusing on creating individuals within those societies. Yeah. So that's something that you should quote her on because that's a very great statement. Yeah. Moving on from this, in terms of creating great systems and all of that, and you said right now, we've kind of dispersed because that initial kind of vision, we're not tunnel visioned anymore. Yeah. And that's because of the current situation that we're in. It's not as streamlined. So, I mean, what would you say to people that are seeing things back home unfold in a way where we're kind of like falling back to being somehow okay with the kind of people we were protesting against and we had issues against in the last couple of years? How do we make sure we balance that so that we do not lose that tunnel vision that we had before, whilst at the same time working to make sure that there is sustainable peace? Because without sustainable peace, we can't implement some of the visions that we had, right? So how do you balance those two?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is for all of us to have an educated opening of things, right? Pretoria Agreement, what does it mean? What does it entail? حزي عايز حد سوات بقى زخون نجار نيتجراي مرحتي نام حرق للخدو نام قال لي خدو تلوق النادر سويرية and I feel like that comes of course there is emotion which we all have but if you look at it pragmatically and if you understand the Pretoria Agreement then it's obvious that they have to do it. The agreement entails that Tigray will be reintegrated into Ethiopia. What does that mean? So maybe those of you حزتنا ردوا زلقهم تخفرهم تلا يتردأكم النيرو مالتيو. I think حدنا شو تنادينا جوجرانا تلحيتوت إن خوني خليو. So what really is important is for people to really understand what's happening and to agreement to time مالتيو. So that we have a pragmatic approach to things, right? And whether Tigray continues to be part of Ethiopia or an independent country, we have to make peace with our neighbors. Tigray doesn't live in an island. We have to find a way تمليسهم نعنا متيوم زي يطفوا لما نقدم على تيو and السنة مجوار ببلحي بميلان حرت تحيزو we just have to understand but these are the facts this is where we are what can I do أبزي أخوينا حزب زلا جزي أخوينا سنتجريت كم يجر أي زو حسين أنا نحسب لنا مثلني so I see a lot of people, making peace with different political actors and even, people that were advocating for our extermination. So as an individual, I have the choice to say, no, I am not going to speak with anyone that wished death and havoc on my people. But when we see government officials, they don't have that luxury. They have to go and make peace and find ways. But it can be done without disrespecting the people of Tigray, without inflicting further pain on the people of Tigray. I don't need to say, but diplomatically, you have to work with people. And that is the reality of politics, unfortunately. So, نهزونا expectation and يزغتل. We have to manage our expectations, and we manage our expectations by having an understanding of what is happening on the ground. Again, I go back to the importance of community. You can have these discussions in communities. You can bring experts and explain developments and find a way for people to have clarity as to what's happening and how they can continue to contribute towards changing it if it's not good. Community for people to understand, there has to be a community. Gaza malatiyu. Gaza nxrzeyu lu qolcu tabatina miqariu. So Gaza nxrni khoyn gin qolcu ikowi makhrumo zhasha man gadi forge khawri khoyliyam. That's what I would say. And another thing is like to malat مساواة سلام كنفتر بتحنا ونجل كنرسعنا قدنا يكونن. For us to make peace with those who inflicted unspeakable level of pain on us, we don't have to forget what they have done to our people. We don't need to forget. We have to find effective ways of getting redress and justice and accountability for our people, but at the same time work towards finding a way of coexistence. That's not who we are as people. What we want is a proper way of holding people accountable. And is if we have clarity as to actors that are supposed to help us in our fight for accountability and justice. زمتوا propositions times mostly. حزي بزح ساعتها كل سبب فتح قمت اللو تتأيق أنت كل اللو يبليو. Okay, what does فتحي mean? تايمالتي فتحي تايمالتي how do you translate فتحي ما أزوي فتح متينا نرجع عن حنا نعج ما أزوي فتح نعيا can be one thing and فتحي to those who survive all the crimes that we have been witnessing from afar could be a different thing. So it's really important that we have a victim-centered approach to everything. And everything we do, أما أخل كون زلوا قايد خجورنا زلوا تستجورة تستجقنا استبدلت هزويو تهزون السوتايو زدلي. So in order to understand what هزب زدلي, we have to connect with the hizbi, not only the government but the hizbi. Hizbi من يوكل government and civic society. So again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, to create bridges between the people in Tigray and us here in the diaspora. But another very important thing is to have a political representation of Tigrayans wherever we live. Here in the US, for example, we need Tigrayans to run for Congress and for Senate. We need people to be on the decision-making table. And that can only be done if we empower the younger generation here. I'll give you a simple example. You have Ilhan Omar, who's from Somalia. She does a great job of advocating for her people. We don't have anybody, even Eritrea and Ukwas, Allahum hada. And إحنا جن حدا يبلنا. It's not because جوزات سواس لزيبلنا أي مثلاً نجن كم community خندق في زلنا. As يوم نحر غيرنا, I think we'll find a way to understand how things should be done, so Tigray is never faced with the kind of challenge that it was faced and that it continues to be faced. Hazoun.
Okay, I have one quite difficult question for you, Meaza.
Yeah.
And I didn't give you any heads up about this question, but I'm sure you're going to you're going to give it a just answer. What comes first, justice or peace?
For me, justice. And I have always been an advocate of justice because you can never have a sustainable justice if you don't, peace if you don't have justice. I'll give an example. I feel the Eritrean government is responsible for so much of pain Tigrayans have experienced throughout generations. I have talked about this openly about my family. I had a sister. I hope she's still alive. Hafteni ratini. قدم she went now Eritrea and Eritrea وقت تجميرو أو تعزيا كاو جزء أمتيوم وسيدوما like they did to so many other Ethiopians. She was abducted from her house and we still don't know where she is. أبي كم زلا عين فلتن بهودي الله مويتادية عين فلتن for over 20 years. This is a sister that I have never had the opportunity, to grow up with. And Nata, this is not a story unique to me, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, Tigrayans who live on the borderlines with Eritrea have went through this. And there was no government that advocated for my sister and people like her. The Eritrean government was not held accountable for the pain that it inflicted on people like my sister. And that has emboldened the Eritrean government, which led to committing the kind of crimes that it committed during the past 2+ years. It kind of changed who I am as a person. I am the person I am today because I want to get justice for my sister, and also because my mom قوالي ناولت سلز حلفت بقى نادين حفتين فتح خمس انتحر كوينس. I remember having this thought in my mind when I was like شو ما انت عمت قال أول أخوينا بقى حق خمهارية نإساس نفردويت كوستلني. But that's all I know because إساس as a government took away everything. The most precious thing in my life is my mom and حفتي. So خلتي كوسة دلي. I have to find a way to get justice. So الشعوب فتح سلا زي ما تقول معات أشحات تجارو كوجزوم تجوم بتلاقي إيروب كناما افتباد مزالم بس دامو جلز سات بزحات تجوم أبيكم زلوا سلا زي تفلت الشعوب and no one spoke up on their behalf. They were not part of any negotiation. They were not part of any discussion. What did it do? Isaias felt like he can do whatever he pleases with the people of Tigray. So the lack of justice has contributed to the emboldenment of Eritrea as a country and Isaias as a leader to commit the kind of crimes he committed. So it is important to give priority to Fathi. When people advocate for justice and accountability, salam it's because we understand the importance of Fathi to get salam. We see it in Sudan. Sudan abzunawarom nay irsibursi ግጭት genocide ምክንያት ስነ ስርዓት ዘለዎ accountability and justice mechanism አይተገበረን. The West has used that opportunity to score a political point and they took some actions. So الካ ሽፍን ቢሎም ሓሊፎም. Now see what's happening. So it's really important that I mean it shouldn't even be a matter of حتى ونس كون يخلن سلام كمت اندحر كوين زلق زلو فتح يخمت زلو فتح اندحر زيلا تمالي أبونا الدين أو قدم يستقطع قلعة سؤال كرس عقاية عرق كان ورتتوهيلو تبع نجوه برتال العلق قالوا اسمه من مجد أرات النجار يكونن سلازي خامونا يخون because we don't need هت أنا تاني نعوي تجادلي كوني لهم aspire كدليو I دلن I respect تجادلتي with all I have جن I don't want any hit أنتجرأي تلعيل تجادلي كون تماهيرو هو تغير حكيم كون ممر كون جلنبر كجادل برت كلعل I don't wish that السن خي يخون لا فتح قمة زلوا. That's why we have to continue our fight and struggle for justice and accountability in Tigray.
Absolutely. Okay, so what role do you think the diaspora can play in making sure we are seeking justice, and also how do you see the diaspora strengthening in the next coming years? And I mean, including yourself, because you are a diaspora, include yourself in the answer as well. Yeah. So what is your role that you're going to play in the next couple of years? What do you see for yourself?
Yeah, like I said earlier, فتح بستفعل لي من قد نديو زقلت فتح مالت تاريخ كم مسنا ديو فتح مالت عد خمل سقط النت توم زت فوان كالوتني عالم لخ أكلات نجوب أمك فتح مجاريو فتح مالت prosecution خوني خليو فتح مالت recognition مجناي خوني خليو. So there are so many things that we can do. For example, حزي we're working with the UK Parliament زخوننا فتح سرحة تتأثر حلو أو there are so many things that are being done behind the scenes. So it's really important that we stay connected and find ways for people to contribute in a way that they can. Artistatna بزعوا تاريخنا نتدريفهم صحافتي بزعوا تاريخنا تسندهم حرستاي نتتاريخو فليتو زت أفو نجار مليسون كفري أبز جورو تعرف نجاريتها تحجزهم. If we all have Tigray at the core of our activity, then we find a way to fight for justice. As to me, I was doing full-time Tigray سرحية سرح نيرة دحر حزقن I have to one thing I want to say is it's really important to develop ourselves as individuals. And إحنا تزيت ماهرنا أن إحنا بتطبق بوتان تحرزي هالينا نعدنا منهم كنجور اللاين خيلن. All of us here زحلف غلط عمت نشتين تجراي contribute جورنا يو. It's because of the work that we have done on ourselves in the years preceding, like prior to the Tigray genocide beginning. So حزون we have to continue developing ourselves as individual. ولا أبز عدي solid زخون إن Tigray community تحرزي هالينا بزعة فتحن تتأيّ أنت النجور قالسي ما نمزوري لي سمعنا. Like I said earlier, if we had قلت سلسلة زخون policy makers in America politics تزولينا نيرهم, things would have been a lot more different than how they transpired مالتي. So حزي, this is a time for us to find a strategic way of getting justice for our people. And we also have to understand نفتح زجبر قالسي بدعمد كامن جزء وسادن خون يخليه مخنياتو فتحي. It's not only about حقي. فتحي is also about politics, like I always say. So نعدت political stand بستغير قطري and إحنا نفتح نجور على السوون استفعل عليه خون يخليه. سلزي we have to prepare ourselves for the long fight, for the hard fight, but we have to believe somehow we have to continue fighting for our people to get justice, because getting justice is بتعمي critical for us to get فتحي. سلزي I will continue to develop myself as an individual. At the same time, I'll continue to do the work that I have been doing and that I'm doing with different government officials and civic societies in Tigray. And I also want to encourage people to focus on themselves. Mental health is a real issue. Being kind towards one another. I know I'm taking too much of your time, but I want to speak about the importance of understanding, the importance of giving grace towards one another. The way we're treating each other is just really scary. بتعمي يزفرح ناوس زفلت كان زي فلت كان ولا تجابي لتعرفك. It's okay. Again, we have to understand. سبب أنت حرت تعرفنا لهم عنتي. We have to understand it's because they're hurting. They're hurting, they're looking for answers, and no one is giving them that answer. Maybe they feel like you're the one to give them the answers. Having that kind of responsibility is humbling, so you have to be able to give them grace. لما أنت حدا سمعت أنت حرمولج قبل تعرف كخن ردهم كأللنا. The back and forth that we're doing on social media is going to break us apart, and it's really important that community leaders, religious figures, take this to heart and really work towards finding a space for people to heal, because everything that you see ننوع الحزيز تقرر زبقة زلسة, it's because بقى سلسة تقود أوشتيو. So حدا ننوع التنا كنرادة. I have received my first share of the harassment, bullying. بالتالي كوني وعلتها community خمت أنت اللي بتعمي يزحمم, because there are so many misunderstandings. ناي منجستو كلت يوم يخفلهم nobody gets paid like everyone else. كله بهوتون كاريرون قلا راح ريح ميدا يقالس نيرو. So خمسة نجارسة متيخا خطرفو خطقواني وقالت لخا it pushes people away. We have so many brilliant عامزلهم سوات سوقن تي backlash to bullying سلازفرهم contribute يجورون يهادموا يحبوا من لوزي جبر eventually Tigray. So for that problem to go away, it's important for all of us to be kind. And I just whenever I receive bullying from my community, I don't respond. I don't say anything. I find a way to talk to them, or maybe send someone to talk to them. I don't say anything up public. I will never ever attack a single Tigrayan of the Goti. Naigazaha Tagam, Autihanis Alai, I too. Kulsha Gaza, so Tigray Melat, Tigray community, Gaza Unaya. So if any Tigray does me like wrong, I will find a way to handle that within my community. Majamarta. Kindness is really important, and understanding that we all are hurting. كلنا in hurting قبل زلنا. So we have to find a way for all of us to heal together as a collective.
So I would like to end our discussion with one very important question. What is your vision for Tigray? Hada, Khilta, what's your vision for the diaspora's contribution in Tigray? And Celesta, what is the vision for your contribution in Tigray?
Yeah, that's a very loaded question. My vision for Tigray is to be free and to progress, to develop, for the women of Tigray to be free. My ultimate vision is to see a female president of Tigray. That's what I want. Not because I'm female, but because female have shown you guys time and again that we are capable of leading. So my vision, my ultimate dream is to have a democratic and liberated Tigray led by women. And to that effect, the diaspora has to take, we have so much power. And it doesn't need to get into our heads and we don't need to go again. عقم لنا نحنا influence كنجبر نخيلنا. So influence نجورو لمبوتاتات كنمرت لنا. حز كلكم تريد لكم. Pretoria سمع معنات no single goal. أبز جبر diplomatic relationship no single goal تنستيتي. أبز جبر نايدق مهنت زررب no single goal نستيتي. مو أبز اخترخونات لكم كن وعرو قلت ولنا أبي دامول له تعرت ولوه like مالت like Now, if you think, I am very much grateful. Whenever you see me, goes okay, you say the same thing to Melat, to Axum, to Aziza, and everyone else that you see doing such a great job. But there are so many strong women in Tigray that can do more than us. Why don't you speak up? When you don't see a single woman holding space, نمتى زي تزارو. I've table قالتنا state and حرزي لقط ريتو لكم. Issue a statement. Talk to the government. Talk to the political leaders. If you don't do that again, ترخونات لكم نعنا جوز قالت ولو نمسالي يوم قالتي نام ماني كونن. So نايمان ندحر كوينو. You have to find a way to empower the women of Tigray. تقاليسن أقاليسن نعدينا تأوتينين قدمون حزون. مورز تقول على لساتنين. سلازي بحد إدنا خلنا نجوج سلازي نقل. You have to find a way to empower women. That's my hope. That's what I wish the diaspora to do. I didn't see a single organization issuing a statement complaining about the lack of inclusivity in the current political sphere in Tigray. كله بزعوا خالي political party يزارب. No one talks about the lack of women in this decision-making tables. But whenever there is a problem, ناوي يقولكم تموتوا نبدأ كنستيو. أعديكم ولا أبدأ جمالتيو. سلازي Tigray كتعبن تحركوينا. For the Tigray that I want to see, for ta معبلتي ta سلام زلوا, democracy زلوا, Tigray نختمت, men and women need to have equal participation, and the women have to be brought forward. So أفزي أخسر حيوناتي وانا تعري. And for me, on a personal capacity, like everyone else, I need to take a moment to heal. I think all of us have been exposed to so much trauma the past 2+ years. There were times where we spent sleepless nights. منهم زي دقسنا هيوتنا مويانا تعينا نقول خلو تنتينا يو تجراي مبارك على هيوت زلوا سلا زي مثلنا نورا جن so I think عنزرنا يوزي مثلنا I think أنا نوعلي عنزير يعني را مخنياتوس نتجراي أنا ندحر زي اللخص نتجراي من ما يجور لنا مهلاي مالت like existing and living are two different things. Yes, I do exist, but I didn't live the past 2+ years. So I have to find a way to live so I can contribute to Tigray meaningfully in Zilazzi. As I continue my fight and my struggle for Tigray, I will also try to find ways to empower myself further and to heal.
I think those were amazing answers. I think she deserves another round of applause. Yeah, I mean, that was amazing. Although your answers, I couldn't have, agreed with you more, especially the part about women, I must emphasize. And thank you for being here with us today. I know you're very busy. You flew all the way from DC to be here. So your commitment, and everything that you've done so far has been acknowledged. We're very much appreciative and supportive of you, both in your personal journey and your journey as being a representative for our community as well. So give her a round of applause.
Thank you, appreciate that. Thank you.
So thank you, Meaza. Guys, before you go, the organizers have made sure to let me know, to let you know that the cultural gala begins at 8 p.m. sharp, guys. Not 9 p.m., not 10 p.m., at 8 p.m. sharp. And we expect you to wear your cultural gear and everything. 8 p.m. sharp, guys, not 2 hours later. Okay, have a great evening, guys.
Maybe I just can't stop, I want more. Ease my pain till the sun come up. Tease me, baby, and turn me on. Something I can think about to live for.